Bobby Jindal emphasized ethics and transparency, and he transformed the state government of Louisiana from an embarrassment to what's been called the best in the nation. He emphasized jobs in the economy, and he set an all-time record for employment in the state of Louisiana and a top ranking for a business-friendly climate, a role that I think I might want to follow at some point. Another thing he did that I think is a pretty good idea, he championed education reforms, more choice for families, a statewide school scholarship choice program, and outcomes in Louisiana, not surprising under Bobby Jindal's leadership, are improving. Healthcare reforms, not surprisingly, was a big thing with Bobby Jindal. He focused on, listen to this, what an idea, outcomes, delivery, cost containment, real improved access, and he put patients in charge of their health care. Unlike Kathleen Blanco's failed leadership during the disaster of Katrina, in 2008, Hurricane Gustav hit Louisiana. Bobby Jindal moved 1.9 million people to safety, a historic record. Over 10,000 people out of hospitals and nursing homes, their lives were protected. That's why leadership matters, ladies and gentlemen. Leadership and leaders matter, the willingness to deal with reality as reality is dealt to you, and to make a decision. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome one of the finest leaders in the entire nation, my friend, Governor Bobby Jindal.
That very warm reception. You know, I don't know about you, but Bob sounds like he might make a pretty good governor. What do y'all think? I'll say this, Colorado needs a governor that understands you need to grow the private sector economy, you need to cut government spending, you need to cut taxes, unleash the power of energy. So remember Bob Beaupre when it's time to vote later this year. One other thing I want to say, I had a chance to visit with my good friend Corey Gardner today, and let me tell you something. Corey understands the importance of having affordable energy in America. Corey understands the importance of having a consistent foreign policy. Corey understands the importance of growing our private sector economy. But if you need no other reason, wouldn't it be great to retire Harry Reid as the majority leader of the Senate? Now, I thought long and hard about what I wanted to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about the most dangerous consequence of the Obama administration. Now, there are a lot of things that worry me about this president. I worry about $17 trillion of debt. I worry about Obamacare, where we've got bureaucrats between us and our doctors. I worry about a foreign policy where our allies, our enemies, don't know where America stands from day to day. I worry about a culture that decays and decays and decays day by day in front of our very eyes. I worry about an EPA that is out of control and struggling and smothering our economy. I worry about more and more spending and borrowing and regulations. But you know, a lot of these things can be reversed with a conservative majority in Washington, D.C. The thing that worries me the most, the thing that worries me not only as a governor, but as a husband and as a father of 3 young children, the thing that worries me the most is this president's relentless efforts to redefine the American dream. Now, what do I mean by that? If you listen to this president's policies, you listen to his rhetoric, You hear a president trying to divide us by class, by geography, by gender, by race. You hear a president talking to us about how government needs to get bigger and more intrusive and more powerful. You hear a president that wants to make us more and more like Europe. You hear a president who describes an America whose best days are already behind us. A president who wants to manage the slow decline of this once great country, this once great economy. I don't know about you, but the American dream that I learned from my parents was never about envy. It was never about class warfare. The American dream I learned about was an America where our best days are always ahead of us. An America where you're not promised equality of outcomes, but you are promised equality of opportunity. An America where the circumstances of your birth don't determine your outcomes as an adult. An America where every generation leaves more opportunities for our children and our grandchildren than we inherited from our parents. And I want to talk to you tonight about what we can do, what we must do to fight and preserve the American dream for our children and our grandchildren. I want to start by telling you why this is so personally important to me. My parents, they have lived the American dream. My daddy's one of 9 children. First and only one to get past the 5th grade. Literally grew up in a house without running water, without electricity. I know because we heard these stories every single day growing up. You try to get an allowance from a father like that. But you know, Mark Twain said something smart. He said, the older you get, the smarter your parents become. I've got 3 young children, and as we try to raise them, my wife and I, I'm becoming more and more like my father. And I hate it, but I'm saying things to my kids I swore I would never say when my dad said to me. I don't know about your dad, but my dad would say things to me like, well, son, you're not being raised in a democracy. As long as you live under my roof, you're living under my rules. He never worried about trying to be my friend. He was, you know, I dropped my kids off at Sunday school, and they were telling me, you know, Governor, we're trying to teach the kids to obey God out of love, not fear. I said, fear worked just fine on me, don't worry. Sometimes a little bit of an Old Testament God is not a bad thing when you're trying to raise young kids. But one of the things my dad would always teach my brother and me growing up was that we needed to be grateful every day. He said, sons, you need to get on your knees and give thanks to Almighty God that you are blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America. Here's the amazing thing about my parents' story. So my parents, nearly 50 years ago, come from halfway across the world to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so that my mom could study at LSU. And by the way, yeah, go Tigers, thank you. And by the way, they came legally. They followed the rules to come into this country. I've got a simple message to the President of the United States. His policies, his inactions have helped to create the crisis at the border. He continues to look for folks to blame. He needs to look in the mirror. We don't need any more comprehensive 1,000-page bills. We need the President of the United States to do his job, secure the border. Secure it now. But my parents come from halfway across the world, and here's the amazing thing. It was expensive to get on a plane back then. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. They'd never been to America. They'd never been to Louisiana. They'd never even met anybody who'd been to Louisiana. They couldn't even ask somebody, you know, what's the food like? What's the weather like? What are the people like? They never could even. So instead, they get on a plane. They come from halfway across the world. My dad with my mom, who was pregnant with me. But my dad had this unshakable faith. He knew that if you got to America, that if you worked hard, you got an education, you could do great things. Your kids could have even more opportunities than you had. He believed in the American dream. So they get here and they move into married student housing. My mom goes to classes, my dad starts looking for a job. And I love this part of the story. He doesn't know anybody, so he does what he knows to do. He picks up the yellow pages and he starts calling company after company after company. I don't know if it took him hours or days or weeks, but he kept calling and calling and calling. Now, my dad's got an accent. No, I don't have an accent. This is just our regular people. I don't mean a southern accent. I mean, he's got an accent. But finally, he wears down a guy from a railroad company. The guy from a railroad company says, "Sir, you can start work on Monday morning." And I love the rest of this story. My dad tells his new boss, he hasn't even met the guy yet. Well, that's great. He said, "Now look, I don't have a car. I don't have a driver's license. You're going to have to pick me up on the way to work Monday morning." The guy was so taken with his enthusiasm, he did that. My dad starts work. 6 months later, I was born at Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge. Same hospital where 2 of my 3 children were born. And by the way, that third child, he was born at home, but that wasn't on purpose. That's a whole other story for another day. Everybody kept coming up and congratulating me. The only thing I'll say about that is to the men in the audience, give thanks that Almighty God allows women, not men, to have babies. If it was up to us, men, there would never be another baby again. There'd be one, that's it. I've been married to my beautiful wife now. This is our 17th year of marriage. It is the first and only time I've ever lied to my wife. I know you're not clapping for me lying to my wife, but I'll tell you just very quickly. Our baby was being born. It wasn't on purpose. We didn't plan this. Some families do. We were supposed to go to the hospital, but instead we were in the bedroom on the bathroom floor because there wasn't time to go. And our beautiful baby is being born. It's our third child. Our second boy is being born. It's the only time in 17 years of marriage. As our baby was being born, my wife asked me. She said, "Well, what does he look like? How does he look?" They don't come out all pink and beautiful in blankets, you know. It's not like it is on TV. If I had been honest, I would have said, "He doesn't look like he's done. Let's put him back in there for a little longer." What I was really thinking was, he looks like your side of the family. He doesn't look like my side. I don't know who he looks like. I said, no. He's a beautiful baby boy. 10 fingers, 10. He's beautiful. I will tell you this, though. After all that pain and all the agony she'd gone through, when I handed my wife, we've been married now. We've been married for a while. We'd had 2 children already. When I handed her our newborn son, I don't think I've ever loved her more than in that moment, watching her not worry about herself, not worry about her own pain, her own suffering, but just so in love with her new child as she held him for the first time. And so the dumbest thing I ever heard was after this happened, I went to church and a guy came to me and said, "Bobby, the same thing happened to me." I said, "What do you mean the same thing?" He said, "I had me a kidney stone. It's the same thing." I said, "I wouldn't go home and tell my wife that." Well, anyway, I was born at Women's Hospital. I was what you would politely call a pre-existing condition. Now, there was no Obamacare back then. All that meant was my parents' insurance didn't cover me. But what I love is what my dad did next. They didn't go to a government program. They didn't fill out a bunch of paperwork. My dad just shook hands with the doctor. And he promised to send him a check every month until he paid that bill in full. That's just what you did back then. But you know, it was a simpler time. I don't know if that would work today. I asked my dad, "How do you pay for a baby on layaway?" I mean, if you skip a payment, can they take the baby back? What do they do? He says, "Don't worry, you're paid for." He said, "You were such a bad little boy, we would have skipped a payment if they would have taken you back." He goes, no. He goes, "You're paid for, don't worry about it." The reason I tell you that is my dad would always tell my brother and me growing up, he'd say, "Sons, I'm not leaving you an inheritance, but I am going to make sure you get a great education." He said, "I'm not going to leave you a famous last name, but if you work hard, there's no limit what you can do in this great country." How many sons and daughters have heard from their parents? How many of you, I bet you, and every one of you has got that same story in your family. Maybe you were the first, maybe it was your parents, maybe it was your grandparents that were the first to go to school, the first so the others could have a better opportunity after you. How many little boys and girls across this country have heard from their parents, you could be the first to own a business, you could be the first to go to college, you could be the first to be a farmer, to be an accountant, a doctor, or a nurse, whatever it is you dream to be. How many times across America have moms and dads told their kids, any child can grow up to become president of the United States? Unfortunately, in 2008, 2012, we found out just how true that is in America. I'm here to talk about how do we fight to keep that American dream alive, the dream that my dad described to me that your parents taught you about for our children and grandchildren. And I thought long and hard about the things I could talk to you about today. Like in Louisiana, we've done several things I'm proud of. We've cut our state budget 26%. We've got one of the strongest Second Amendments in our state constitution. We have cut 28,000 state government jobs, a booming private sector economy, more people working than ever before. Year after year, we're rated the most pro-life state in the country. There's so many things we could talk about in Louisiana. But the thing I want to talk about is the fight we have fought to make sure that our children get a great education. Because in America, it is not honest to tell a child you can pursue the American dream if they don't have a chance to go to a great school. But if we're honest with ourselves, there are millions of children across this great country that are trapped in failing schools. And there are so many things I could talk about what we have done in Louisiana. The most important, the single most powerful thing we've done is this. We've said we're going to let the dollars follow the child instead of forcing the child to follow the dollar. And it's all pretty simple. We think parents are the first and best educators. No two children learn exactly alike. Some children will be better off homeschooled. Some children will be better off in Christian schools, private schools, public schools, charter schools, online schools, dual enrollment programs. The point is parents know best. In New Orleans, 90% of our kids are in charter schools, double the percentage doing reading and math on grade level in 5 years. We've got a statewide scholarship, a statewide choice program where the dollars follow the child. We save taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. 93% of the parents are satisfied. It grows by double digits every year. Who could oppose a program like that? Teachers' unions. That's exactly right. Here's what the teachers' unions had to say about it. They said parents don't have a clue when it comes to making choices for their kids. I met with a group of moms that said we make choices for our kids every day. We know the needs of our kids better than the bureaucrats in Baton Rouge or Washington, D.C. But make no mistake about it, this is exactly what this debate is about. The left thinks we're not smart enough to buy big gulps. They think we're not smart enough to own guns. They think we're not smart enough to worship and live our faiths the way we believe. They think we're not smart enough to buy our own health insurance. They think we're not smart enough to choose the right schools, the right educational paths and options for our children. And so I invited the president to come and meet with the moms who came and told me this is the first time their children are bringing home homework. First time their children are going to schools with uniforms. First time they're going to schools where they feel safe. First time they're going to schools where there are pens and paper and pencils in the classrooms, toilet paper in the bathrooms. I wanted the president to meet the single mom that told me her mom had gotten pregnant as a teenager and had her and gone on welfare. She had gotten pregnant as a teenager, had gone on welfare. She was now in tears. She was working 3 jobs so that her daughter could go to a better school, was going to a private school in our scholarship program. She was determined her daughter would break the cycle and would not repeat the mistakes that she said she had made. The reason I want the president to meet those moms is that Eric Holder and the Department of Justice, almost 50 years to the day of Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech, took the state of Louisiana to federal court to stop children from leaving failing schools and to have a choice to go to better schools and have better choices. Now, I went to D.C., the National Press Club. I called this federal lawsuit cynical, immoral, and hypocritical. I said it's cynical to use the laws designed to help these kids to keep them trapped in failing schools. It's immoral. These children only have one chance to grow up. It's also hypocritical because neither the president nor the attorney general would send their children to the same failing schools they're choosing for these children. I don't think I'm getting invited to the next President Obama Christmas party at the White House, by the way, but that's all right. Now, I made the claim and I made the commitment that we would fight all the way to the United States Supreme Court to protect the rights of the children of Louisiana. And I'm proud to report to you we won in federal court. But this is the disturbing thing. How do we get to the point where the federal government feels like it has the power to keep children trapped in failing schools? And by the way, and this is a side note, how do we also get to the point where the federal government thinks that it has the right through Common Core to dictate curriculum to local school districts? We're fighting that battle in Louisiana. I've told the superintendent, I've told the Board of Education, we're getting Common Core out of Louisiana. They try to sneak around us, so we've frozen their contracts, and we'll continue to fight them. But I want to go back. How does the federal government get to the point where they think they've got the right to do that? I would argue that this goes back to something that David Axelrod said that I actually agree with. I know, I was surprised too. I didn't expect to agree with David Axelrod. In defending the president from one of his many scandals, and I don't remember which one, there have been so many. David Axelrod was defending the president and said this. He said the president basically couldn't be at fault. He couldn't have known what was going on because the federal government is so vast and so expansive. Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly the problem. Bill Clinton famously said in the 90s the era of big government was over. Well, never before has somebody been so wrong about something so important in modern political history. You think about the government abuses and excesses we have seen just in the last 5 or 6 years. If I could have gone back in time, if I was standing back on this stage several years ago, I don't think we would have believed, if I had predicted for you the things we have seen come true, you would have laughed at me out loud. You would have said, no way that is going to happen in the United States of America. If I had stood on this stage and asked you, do you really believe our own federal government would borrow up to $17 trillion in debt? Would we have believed that? No. If I could have gone back in time and said that our federal government was going to use the IRS to go after conservative groups for their beliefs, would we have believed that? No. If I could have gone back in time and said, you really believe the Department of Justice will get guns to Mexican drug cartels in Fast and Furious while they fight the rights of law-abiding Americans to have guns? Would we have believed that? No. If I would have gone back in time and said, do you believe they would create this new government entitlement program called Obamacare when we can't afford the programs we've got today, would we have believed that? No. If I would have gone back in time and said, would you believe that our ambassador would be killed in Benghazi? And they would blame a YouTube video. Would you have believed that? No. If I would have gone back in time and said that our then Secretary of State, Secretary Clinton, would then get so exasperated, she'd say to a Senate committee, what difference does it make? Would you have believed that? No. If we would have gone back in time and predicted all of these scandals, the Department of Justice spying on reporters, if we would have gone back in time and predicted the mess this president's made of the foreign policy, we wouldn't have believed any of this. And it brings me to one of the worst examples yet. If I'd gone back in time and predicted for you that our federal government would be waging war on one of our most precious rights, the right to religious liberty. How many of you are grateful that the Supreme Court found that the Green family and Hobby Lobby does not have to spend their money buying abortifacients? But I want you to think about something. The federal government was threatening the Green family with $1.3 million a day in fines simply because they didn't want to spend their own money buying abortifacients for their employees. Here's a family that's created jobs, an entrepreneurial family. Here's a family that closes their stores on Sunday, that pays their employees well above the minimum wage. Here's a family that uses their own money to buy full-page ads in the nation's newspapers to explain the significance of Easter, of Christmas, of July the 4th. Here's a family spending their own money, building a wonderful museum to educate our children about Scripture. Here's a family that should be celebrated, not persecuted, not attacked. And yet this is just one symptom of the assault on religious liberty. Yes, it's great that we won, but why was it not 9-0? Why was it a 5-4 decision in the United States Supreme Court? You know, sometimes you hear the President and Secretary Clinton talk about the freedom of worship. It's not the freedom of worship. Let's be very careful, because when they say that, What they mean is, yes, you've got the right to worship the way you want for an hour on Sunday and maybe an hour on Wednesday, and that's it. That's not religious liberty that our founding fathers understood. And you can see this in large cases and small. You may have noticed when the guys on Duck Dynasty got in a little bit of trouble. You may have noticed that one of their first and loudest offenders was the governor of Louisiana. You may have thought I did that because they make the show in Louisiana, and that's not right. You may have thought I did that because they're friends of mine, and they are, but that's not why. You may have thought I defended Phil because my boys are huge fans of the show. And they are huge fans. And by the way, isn't it nice to be able to watch a TV show with your kids where you don't have to cover up their eyes or cover up their ears every 30 seconds? No, I spoke up for Phil and I spoke up for the Duck Dynasty guys because of this. I am tired of the left. I'm tired of the left. They keep telling us that they believe in tolerance. They believe in diversity. They believe in respect. And they do believe in tolerance and diversity and respect, except for anybody who has the temerity to actually disagree with them. You know, I knew the president didn't like the Second Amendment to the Constitution. I thought he at least liked the First Amendment to the Constitution. And I'm not one that's in favor of lawsuits. We passed tort reform in Louisiana, but for many years now, we've been saying that this president is a smart man. We've been saying he's a constitutional scholar. I've actually found a lawsuit I'm willing to endorse. I think the President of the United States should sue Harvard Law School to get his tuition money back. I'm not sure what he learned during those 3 years. He certainly didn't read the Constitution while he was there. Here's the amazing thing. Here's the amazing thing. Several weeks ago, a few months ago, the president was speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, and he spoke eloquently about the need to defend the rights of religious liberty, and especially of Christians being persecuted overseas. Now, it is true, there is a shooting war overseas against Christians who are being killed because of their faith. Here in America, it is only a silent war, and I'm not trying to conflate the two. But it was still jarring to hear the president once again ignore the Grand Canyon-sized gap between his rhetoric and his actions. Or another way, if you didn't happen to hear the speech, if you want a summary of it, the president had this to say: if you like your religious liberty, you can keep your religious liberty. I've got a message for the President of the United States that he needs to learn, he needs to hear loudly and clearly. The United States of America did not create religious liberty. Religious liberty created the United States of America. It is the reason we're here today. There is no freedom of speech, there is no freedom of association, there are none of these other rights without the fundamental right of religious liberty. And you know, as I look at the insanity that now seems to define our foreign policy, as I begin to wrap up, I just want to ask you a few questions. Like me, maybe you've noticed our president has adopted a new policy. We now apparently have a catch and release policy when it comes to terrorists. I just want to make sure, though, I just want to ask you 3 simple questions, and I want to hear your answer. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Do you think that the President of our United States of America should be negotiating with terrorists? Do you think the President of the United States should be releasing 5 terrorists, not only so they can go after American lives, but they can continue to wage war on our very way of life? Do you think the President of the United States should have the right to pick and choose when and which laws he wants to follow or ignore? And that all leads me to this. It leads me to a very important question. And this is truly a difficult question. I don't pretend that this is an easy question. I've been thinking long and hard about this. As you look at this president's administration, you look at what the Obama administration has been doing to our country and the American dream, are we witnessing the most radically, ideologically, extremely liberal administration in our lifetimes? Or are we witnessing the most incompetent administration in our lifetimes? I've thought long and hard about which it is, and the only answer I can come up with is to quote Secretary Clinton. What difference does it make? But I will close with this. I'm a complete optimist about America. In my bones, I know our best days are ahead of us, not because of the buildings in D.C., not because of our government. The Founding Fathers knew this. The genius of America, enshrined in our founding documents, is the freedom they entrusted to the American people, to husbands, to wives, to mothers, to fathers, to the entrepreneurs creating something out of nothing. Our best days will always be ahead of us, but we must remember the words of our 40th president. Every generation must choose for themselves to renew these principles of freedom. And I will remind you of this. I sense there is a rebellion brewing amongst these United States of America. Enough good people of faith, enough good principled conservatives are saying enough is enough. We're going to take our country back from those in D.C. We're going to wage a hostile takeover. We're going to restore the American dream for our children and grandchildren. God bless you. Let's continue to fight the good fight for God, these United States of America. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very, very much.